Welcome back, friends. This week I'm delighted to share with you my conversation with Rabbi Maxim Cohen. Maxim, as you'll soon hear, is a positive, energetic and very driven individual who is constantly on a path of building, growing and achieving. I've learned so much from him personally throughout the years, and hopefully many others will gain from hearing his journey. A big thank you to Dovi Feldman at Feldview and Alex Haffner at Fusion Funding. Your support has helped this podcast reach thousands of listeners across the world, and for that I am so grateful. Let's go. Good morning, Maxim.
Good morning.
Fresh off the plane from
Israel.
It's been amazing trying to get this.
To catch me.
Catch me. Oh yes, you're a fly
catch
on the
me
wall.
If you
And I'm
can.
just trying to not being easy, but I'm really grateful. Honestly, I had a list of people who, when I first started the podcast, and Maxim Cohen was very
At the bottom.
No, very close to the top. Close for a number of reasons, and I've known you for a bunch of years now. I think it's been probably 8-9 years since we first met, and we've been following your journey and watching your brand evolve and the different elements of stuff. So as it stands, I think your title is quite extensive. We've got the UK advisor, UK lender, UK investor, UK accountant, Jewish Lending Institute, and a rabbi. That's one head essentially with 6 hats. Tell me what's going on.
It's all very simple, really.
Go on. Share it with us.
Okay, so as you know, started off my career as an accountant, doing audits very early on, which was probably the most boring part of being an accountant, wishing there's got to be something more to this. But ultimately, I found that most of our clients needed mortgages and finance. And having gone through the accountancy journey, I thought, you know what, let's see what does it entail. So I looked into it and saw the qualifications and the FCA and everything we needed to do. So fast forwards, and we got our FCA regulation. I got qualified, and we started to do mortgages and finance. And ultimately, I started helping our own client base, more complicated structures in their income, and that's kind of where UK Advisor was born. And that was kind of the first part of the journey.
Right.
And that really is just very simple. A good brokerage, mortgage and finance, and we've got exceptional relationships with our lenders, good relationships with clients, and ultimately just putting two together. Someone who wants money, someone wants to lend money, and that's how UK Advisor was born.
Incredible. How are you branded as the accountancy? Has that stayed as it was?
We've still got our accountancy practice,
right.
boutique in Hale in Cheshire,
right.
And that's actually my mentor. My not many people can say this. Their dad is their mentor, but I've got the merit to have that. And he built that practice very much based on being there for their clients and being able to actually, just pick up the phone, understand complicated structures, and give that real advice. And I suppose that's really what spurred me on to say, well, within our ecosystem, I can build on and give more to our clients. People spend a lot of money, if they get to a certain financial position, they'll go to KPMG and, Deloitte's and all these wonderful accountancy practices where they've got access to all these things. But, it shouldn't just be that you have to be at that level to be able to access. So we kind of brought, a smaller availability to our nice client base. And, I still talk to my Rose Cohen clients, and they are still a big part of our of who we fund and who we invest in. And that's kind of works really well with the UK Advisor. But then it started to kind of build on, I've never been one to do things small and see, what are the next steps that we can really start to have. Now, again, it's not been plain sailing. So you all know something called COVID was around.
Yes.
There was Liz Truss's mini budget.
Yeah.
So there's been lots of lessons and lots of things that we've taken on board. But I think actually those harder times and those times when we've had to really look at what we're doing and what we have access to actually allowed us to build different parts of the business. Right. And really, please God, get it to where we want to today. So what also came about was the UK lender. So this is where, we kind of got a pot of money that we started to lend out to clients that we already had relationships with. And we've got great relationships with our lenders. So we're not here to be in competition with them. But it obviously also is a nice opportunity for us to actually lend to our clients.
So you're giving that full cycle to your clients from beginning to end.
Exactly. And the key for us as well is we're in control of the full. As you know, you were in the property game. Yeah. Bridging finance is not cheap. It's a means to an end. And if it's done properly, it really can help people. So the fact is we're in control of that whole process, i.e. we can lend out, and then we can also get other longer term lenders through our brokerage to take out those loans. So for us, that gives us control, confidence in be able to do it. Actually, we had one client who we worked with a certain lender to get a £5 million bridging loan on 45 properties in 4 days, which was just incredible. That was definitely a jam-packed 4 days.
It's like a day in the office.
A day in the office, exactly. Yeah. It was very calm, really, really was. And then we just exited that bridging loan with a term lender. And actually, the client bought the properties, obviously in 4 days, 30% below market value,
right,
but realized the real value in the exit.
Yeah.
So was able to get some cash out, which to really add to their portfolio. So I think it's utilizing what's there, making sure that we're making the right decisions, but ultimately, obviously very, very happy clients, and just proved to us that it does work, and obviously with the right planning type of thing.
Fantastic.
Then actually, and this is something we'll touch on a bit later, is UK investor. So,
right,
that's a...
And you were missing one.
There's a few.
Yeah,
You definitely got a few. So UK investor essentially does what it says on the tin, as a lot of our businesses do, right, is it's investing in the UK. So I suddenly started to realize, and this is through connections that we had, that as much as the UK talks themselves down internally to the rest of the world, they are a safe haven for investments.
It's so
boring and predictable. No, there's everything you want in an investment. But there's a stability compared to the rest of the world. So we are working with investors in Israel and America and Australia, also driving that capital into the UK. But that's them actually buying into real estate, funding other lenders, so funding lines that we're working on, and also equity investment as well. So it's really kind of driving all those three.
It's just,
three
I find it unique that that boring instability. It's just people, sometimes something which looks less glamorous on the outside can actually be something that people are craving, especially when it comes to...
Oh, absolutely. Especially after, 5-6 years, even post-Brexit, of the world kind of going mad. Even with Brexit and what happened after Brexit, the UK now is, seen as, it's calm. It's the property market is quite predictable, give or take. It's there's a good regulation around, and it's
That's fascinating. I need to understand how you juggle so many different services and responsibilities. Well, as long as I've known you, always a smile, always relaxed, always got time for a schmooze. Like, how do you go about it?
So I often think of Rabbi Twertsky. So he was a
Rabbi Doctor
Twertsky. He was an incredible guy, and he was once asked, because he wrote 50 books.
Yes.
How did you write 50 books? And he says, well, I wrote 50 books, but it's really one book written 50 different ways. And I think that's the thing in any business that we have. The core of our business is essentially matching up capital. People who want capital and people who want to give away capital. And whether it's somebody wants to borrow and somebody wants to lend, somebody wants to invest, somebody wants to get investment, ultimately it's all about the movement of capital. So once you break something down like that, actually my day-to-day is really just about getting people together. It's all about relationships, and it's about getting people in front of each other and talking. And it's that human touch. I mean, it's ultimately people don't invest in businesses; they invest in people. People don't invest in properties; they invest in the people behind the property. And that is something I've really found.
So once you laid that foundation, it was pretty much if it fits into this profile of how we can help people move or get or lend money, then we're going to build a service around it.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest as well, I've got a great team behind me. I'm not going to diminish.
I'm waiting for the secrets.
Yeah, exactly. They're a great team, ultimately who've stuck by me and I kind of understand. I'm definitely a whirlwind, ADHD underdiagnosed, but I think that's a good thing. I've definitely being able to drive things forward and see the end result, but I've got a great team around me who understands the filling in the gaps and, doing that sort of thing.
Maxim, let's hear your story. Where did you grow up? What was your upbringing like as a child? Your journey to date? Just give me a timeline of who you are, where you've come from.
I'm not really called Maxim.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting because I think a lot of where I was, where I was born, what I did, and who I was around actually molded what I'm able to do today. So it definitely does guide you. I was born in a small town village called Hale, which is a small village in Cheshire, to a fantastic family, very, very supportive parents who supported me through various journeys, from a journey of me myself becoming more religious, but also a journey in my business. And I think just having those very supportive parents behind you gives you the ability to get on with it and do. And so, I can't underestimate just having that, how important that is. But beyond, having a wonderful family, Canaan I also had a wonderful community. So Hale is, again, very simple, one shul. It had one rabbi, Rabbi Joel Portnoy, who himself, I would say, is an entrepreneur. I think if he ran it, if he was a businessman today, there'd be empires all around around. It's just a very, very driven individual, and he made a big impact on me personally, becoming more religious, but also seeing how he ran the shul and how he the organization, the people behind it. And I think because it was a small community which I got involved in from a young age, I was involved in arranging things. I was, doing posters and events and, things that probably people wouldn't normally get involved in. I was getting involved in at quite a young age. I used to go and help in the synagogue office. And
what age was this?
What age? I was like 8 years old, 9 years old.
So you weren't sitting still from that.
I was not sitting still. No, I remember actually. Everyone else was probably as young kids were outside playing football. I was actually in my room playing office. I'd rearrange my room into an office, and which I'm sure someone could write a book about all these sort of what did that actually mean? Because I'm really not that organized, so I don't know where they are. Maybe I was organized at a young age. But and I think all those being involved in the synagogue from a young age actually really helped me have a bit of self-confidence, rightly or wrongly, to say, well, why can't I do things? So, when I thought to break away and expand and do things from a business perspective, there wasn't that kind of thing in my head of, well, why I can't do this? It's like, well, yeah, of course I can do it. That's what you've been encouraged to do. That's what I've been encouraged to do. So you have that ability to just to get on with it. So fast forward, I was in the local school, non-Jewish school, great school, ultra preparatory school. Had a great headmaster, Mr. McKay, who I'd say again, very old. Unfortunately, he died, but quite young. But he was just a wonderful individual, and actually encouraged me. He himself wasn't Jewish, but actually encouraged me in becoming more religious as a Jewish person. And I just remember when I was becoming religious in a non-Jewish school, I wanted to start wearing my yarmulke and doing things like that. He was quite encouraging, which was quite special. Yeah, I've always got a special space for. What was propelling
you at that young age to start looking towards religion? Like
religion.
What was? You said you're part of a shul, but kind of what else were you seeing at that point? That sort of were you taking a journey different to your family at that point? Or?
So we were always a very traditional family in the fact that we went to shul on Shabbat. We always had Friday night meals, and so that I suppose I had the basis of knowing. Feeling Shabbat and feeling everything. But obviously, as you'll probably know from me from this conversation, is I always like to take things to the next level.
I'm doing it properly.
So I took it to the next level, and obviously became more and more religious. And my family was exceptionally supportive. Now being a parent myself, knowing what they did for me is incredible. And I know, just incredible. I think is just the word to say. But
so where did you go from from high school? That was high school.
That was junior school.
That was junior school.
So then I went to King David.
Right.
Now I have to say again, things molding you. Actually, it's all these experiences that actually build to where you get to. So I went to King David again because I'd become more religious. I wanted to go to a Jewish school. Other kids were going to Manchester Grammar and all these various different things, and I made the decision I wanted to go to King David, which. Was strange because I was going not with any friends.
But that takes courage. I mean, you were mapping out your future. You really were. As a young teenager, making these life-changing decisions at that point.
Correct. Yeah, and I think thinking back, it's like, how do you do things? And I don't think you think. I think you just get on with it. And it's interesting when you look back and think of. How did I go out my comfort zone with no friends into a completely alien kind of world? Because I had not been in that world before. It was crazy, but I think just doing it and getting on with it, and and I have to say the school was an incredible school. Under Joshua Rowe was the chair of governors at the time. He himself an entrepreneur, and he took a school that was not seen as a world leading or a national leading school. But actually became, there were kids going to Cambridge and Oxford, and it's just an incredible drive there. And I became very close with him. But something the school did is encouraged you to get involved in things. So I, again, not being someone who's quiet and, I suddenly started organizing things in the school. I became they call it the gabbai. I was organizing the different, the different prayer, davening and stuff like that. So, ultimately I was encouraged through school to do things. And, through school I became a bit more religious, started to learn. And I've just met incredible people along the way who, I'll be honest, a lot of the people I met in King David, I'm now involved with from a professional perspective. So, I've got one guy who's heads a solicitor that we do a lot with, and we've got that kind of rapport because we're in school, in school together. And now we're doing, some nice deals. Yeah. And I can call them and say, what's going on? But, we've got that, we knew each other beforehand, and it's...
So you were traveling in every day by yourself from Hill to...
So initially we were getting the metro, it's an hour's journey, and then they started a school bus. But yeah, it was... Again, quite a drive and it's like an hour, especially in the traffic in the morning. So it was like an hour and a half to get to school, an hour and a half to get back from school.
This was your choice.
Which is our choice, exactly. And it's funny, you don't at the time you don't think, oh my gosh, I wish I could be 10 minutes away. I just had a great time. We were traveling to school in the dark, traveling back in the dark. Okay. Teacher-wise, there was some teachers who I still laugh I'm still in touch with now, who've become friends because, I often say I wasn't a naughty boy in school, but I was not a quiet boy. Right. And I think, I had that mutual respect for teachers, but also, I had they say in Yiddish, I had a großer Pisk, I had a big mouth, but
that got me in trouble.
But so it's, but yeah, no, so some teachers still in touch with.
So you've just purchased a property in auction and you're keen to get it going, but it needs work. Lots of work, in fact, and quite frankly, you are too busy to be chasing contractors for quotes, overseeing the works and making sure your project runs according to plan. Partnering with Feldview for hundreds of landlords has been an absolute game changer. From full project management to marketing, letting and tenanting of your property, you can sit back and relax knowing that your new investment is in very safe hands. Whether you have just purchased an investment or are unhappy with your current arrangements, reach out to Dovi today. Details in the show notes.
Okay, let's jump into mortgages for a minute. Last couple of years, I know you said before the UK is being stable and people craving that. For many people, it's been a difficult patch in terms of hugely increased interest rates.
Yeah.
And suddenly they've got to refix at a rate that they couldn't have envisioned when they first took their mortgage out. On the one hand, people need to buy a house, they've got to buy a home and settle. And on the other hand, there's this unpredictability when it comes to mortgages that 5 years in or 10 years in, suddenly they can be faced with a monthly repayment, which they just simply can't afford.
Yeah.
Are there any tips you can share for someone getting onto the mortgage ladder, perhaps how to structure their mortgage in a way that if the market does shift, they shouldn't be left grasping for air?
So I think it's again, we've been in very, very unprecedented times. So rates have increased exponentially. And things are, I suppose we don't have a magic ball. We don't know what's going to happen. But you're already seeing interest rates obviously coming down, central bank bringing the interest rates down, and that obviously has a knock-on effect. If one thing just to say, my dad always says this is, he remembers when rates were 17%, so they're all laughing at us when we're kind of like,
the house costed $4,000.
Yeah, exactly, the house costed $4,000, and so obviously from that perspective, things are a lot cheaper than they were in the in the 1970s and 80s. But we've been used to cheap capital, and that is a thing for our generation where we've had cheap mortgages. I had a guy I did a mortgage during COVID for at 0.99%. Obviously, came out of had to refix 3, 4, 5 times that type of mortgage. But it's like anything, your house is your biggest asset. That's your home. That's something that you take, and it sometimes things cost. We go out for takeaways and we go out, we can spend on things that not necessarily, things that need to be spent on. Yeah. But our house is our haven, as our nest egg. And I think that's something I've learned from the older generation is, things will go up, they will go down, but they generally stabilize. So, what's the advice of people who are just getting on the property ladder? They are probably lucky because and I say this in a way that they probably don't know when it was cheap. Right. So they, it is what it is. And obviously they need to make sure where it is now that it's affordable for them. Obviously as a regulated broker, obviously you need to speak to a competent mortgage advisor, and everyone has got their own situation. But just generally, rates, pretty much where they're going to be. They can go down, they can go up. But ultimately, making sure it's affordable, but realizing when they're looking at that this is your nest egg, this is your house, this is where your family is going to be brought up, and it's probably one of the most important investments you're going to make.
Have you ever gotten involved in situations where somebody couldn't match their repayments on their house?
Yeah. So I suppose part of my there's been times where I've got involved with some pretty desperate situations, and unfortunately there's not always a solution, but I've had the merit for quite a few times to really help people in very, very difficult situations, speaking to banks and lenders and just being there as the guy in the middle. It's not usually your normal mortgage advisor broker kind of thing, but sure. I think I wouldn't really call myself a mortgage advisor, mortgage broker. I'm just hopefully there just to help people. I understand my trade, I understand what I do, but it's relationship driven. Really? So there has been times when I've spoken to lenders and we've managed to sort out a repayment plan or something that allows them to keep the house and get out of that bit of a situation. Yeah. But I'd always say is anyone who finds themselves in difficult situations, the biggest thing is to communicate with your lender. Don't think, well, not communicating is going to magically fix things. Speaking to the lender, being open and honest with them. I know from a lender's perspective, lending ourselves, the thing we worry about is when people don't communicate. Silence is a killer. But being there to communicate and obviously speaking to a competent advisor.
What does that process look like for these people? Is it just like a month or 2 or 3? Like, how does it spiral? Like, what's that journey like?
I think it's like anything. People had their lifestyle, and then things went up. You had gas, electricity, food, everything going up. And it wasn't just anyone, but some people had buffers. Some people, okay, it's hard, but they had that extra spend, so they just don't spend as much. But some people were literally, found pound for pound. And, that spirals quite quickly. If you're 2, 3, 4 months of, say, behind in your mortgage payments, they add up. They add up. And again, it's emotional for people because the first thing they think is we're going to lose our house, and it is ultimately
that's like all the security at that point.
Correct. Is
coming home to a place that's yours, and then
absolutely. And I think it's again just looking at people I speak to, everything I always used to think of being in the accountancy world. It's all about numbers and balance sheets and profit and losses, and I went in auditing materiality schedules and doing sales testing and all various different things. But actually, suddenly you realize the best people out there are the people who actually just understand the individuals. It's all about communication and relationships, and so just being there and understanding these people. Sometimes people. Not everyone is a finance person. Everyone has their expertise. So no one's expecting you to know everything. And people don't know when things happen and, incomes go down or they have a change in circumstances. They don't know what to do. And just being able to call up. I mean, there's plenty, I've got people who WhatsApp me. I'm not getting paid for that service, but, they just know they can speak to me and, I'll just help them and give them that.
It's amazing that in such a corporate environment, it boils down to people supporting people.
Massively.
We don't see that we just get, it's letters in the post, it's emails, it's just a very sort of clinical sort of experience. But it's
and for a lot of people, it is clinical. Ultimately, you have a mortgage, you keep on top of your payments, and, your only involvement in your bank is maybe refixing the rate a couple of years later. But, I think where people are really going, and actually this is something I learned from my dad from the accountancy practice and actually how we've built our companies is people having access to people, having, actually the ability to speak and, have an open conversation is actually what it's all about. Yeah. And, through social media and LinkedIn and all these various beautiful things where, LinkedIn shows everyone's doing amazingly. Yeah. But I have conversations with people who've just taken the picture on LinkedIn and then I'm, 10 minutes later dealing with, cash flow issues for their businesses or, their issues. That's reality. That's real life. Yeah. And that's what it's,
interesting. You're dealing with the coming and going of huge sums of funding. And I'm curious to know, if this has shaped in any way the way you interact with personal finance, or do you sort of manage to keep the two very, very separate?
It's funny because you get to a point where you don't think of the actual value. As in, obviously, there's the value because you know what you're doing.
That's my question. Does money lose its value when seeing so much?
It does. I think it loses. Maybe I don't want to say loses its importance, but I think it. And I don't think it loses its value, but I think you very much see the two. I could be doing a £5 million business loan to get, an asset. But at the end of the day, it's still an asset. There's still a borrower. Now, obviously, sometimes, believe it or not, it's easier to get a £5 million loan than it is to get a £100,000 loan. Why? Because usually the guy getting the £5 million loan has got experience, has maybe got a hit track record or history. So sometimes that is easier to facilitate. Whereas the £100,000 loan is maybe someone's first time buyer or someone who's, first time buy to let and stuff like that. But ultimately, the two shouldn't be seen as different. There's still a relationship. And most of the time, by the way, the guy who originally, if you work damn hard on that £100,000 loan, that same guy is usually the guy who then gets you your £5 million loan a couple of years later. So it's worth seeing the value actually in the smaller loans.
And just in terms of personal, you go into a shop and something's like gone up by a quid or by a few shekel. It's sort of just to tap into that. Does it even enter the radar?
Oh, it does.
when
100%.
there's hundreds of millions of pounds in shekel? It does, right?
Yeah, because usually the £100 million is other people's money, whereas when it's your own money,
Okay. I want to touch briefly on business finance. I came across a story put out recently by a member of your team about a business that got themselves into a bit of a tangle. Yeah. Can you share the story with us? What went wrong and how you guys were able to save the day?
Yeah, so this in particular case was, it was a stock finance facility, which again, we've got kind of three different parts of our business. We've got the residential regulated side that does your kind of normal residential mortgages. Then we've got our commercial and bridging side. But then the side that I suppose I've got the real passion for, because it's where I've come from, is is business finance, because it's has the biggest tie to accountancy. So this particular stock finance facility happened to be secured on a property. And the way it worked, it was meant to be a bit like an alternative overdraft. So you've got £100,000 worth of stock. You utilize this facility to be able to, in essence, be a cash buyer to buy the stock. And that usually also allows you to get a certain discount because you can, bid on it, get it, secure move quicker. So that was all fine. But obviously, the last couple of years has been pretty tough. Inflation, interest rates, everything kind of going up. So for businesses, they have struggled more on cash flow. We've definitely seen a real uptick in kind of cash flow facilities. So what kind of happened was, rather than utilizing the sale of that stock to then replenish and repay that facility, it became like a bit more like a term loan, which it never was meant to be. So that's not a cheap term loan. And if it was meant to be a term loan, we would have looked at a different facility. But unfortunately, it got to the stage where we had to repay that business loan facility. The lender was very patient, but ultimately it was never meant to be used as a long-term facility. It was meant to be dipped in and out of. Right. So we, approached quite a few different lenders and managed to actually get a secured facility, a term facility in place. But loan to value wise, it just didn't kind of tick the box where we needed it to be. So I suppose this is, again, where, when I'm looking at what do I do, what's my job, it's, again, just I'm the matchmaker. I need someone who needs money. I've got someone who's got money, and let's put everyone together, whether it's investor, lender.
So having this that broad perspective to sort of see a circumstance, see an issue, see a situation, and say, right, I know which moving parts have to come together to build a solution for this today.
Exactly. And that's the thing, it's all about performing. And when you look at it in a simpler way, it actually makes it more, the ability to help more people because of that. So I was able to, introduce them to a private investor who was happy to lend them, again, in the term facility, to top it up. And ultimately, we were able to pay off that lender. And, I'd say the alternative, had we not done that, was they were going to, unfortunately, have to sell that property to cover that loan, which would have been a shame because he'd worked hard. And so again, a lot of hard work in the background, and but a lot of satisfaction as well. Sure. We're getting that over the line.
Sure. Equity release and lifetime mortgages, in a nutshell, what do these mean? Yeah. What are the principles that we need to know?
Okay, so I hate the word equity release.
It's got a lot of bad reps.
It's got to go, yeah. And it, ultimately, the products that we have today are nothing like the old equity release products. And this is something I've always been very passionate about. Not unfortunately made much of a change because people are stuck that it's equity release. Yeah. But basically, the equity release of today it's called a lifetime mortgage, which basically means that it's for anyone 55 years or older. They go to a competent equity release advisor who will obviously give them bespoke advice. But they will release money on the house based on valuation and based on the age of the client.
Right.
Those are the two kind of factors.
Right.
So rather than it being income based, which a lot of other mortgages are, it's kind of
value and age.
Value, yeah, exactly, value and age. And it's essentially, the reason it's called a lifetime mortgage is the rate is fixed for life, and it carries them till what we call the qualifying event. So the qualifying event is it always made me laugh. This is essentially two scenarios. Number one is no longer in this world, or they move into an old people's home. So there have been times where I've spoken about a qualifying event, and everyone's looking at me like, "Well, what did I miss? What did I miss? Well, why is it qualifying, and why is it an event? There's a Russian out anyway." But it obviously puts people in a better position because obviously lending. A lot of people have got. Of that generation are mainly the baby boomer generation who've paid off their mortgages, have got assets, but are, I say, asset rich and cash poor. Yeah. So it's a tremendous opportunity to be able to release cash in that way. But again, it has nothing to do with the old equity release, which was not a good product. Unfortunately, it has, as you said, a lot of bad reputation. I don't really like calling it, as I said, with passion. In other countries, every country except the UK, it's called a reverse mortgage.
Are there monthly repayments on this, or do they just take the full capital once the...
So it's voluntary. So you can... There are other types of mortgages. There's kind of what we call the RIOs, the retirement interest-only mortgage, which is not a lifetime mortgage. That is where you're utilising retirement income, and that is interest-only, and ultimately you are covering that kind of works akin to a normal mortgage. On an equity release, it's voluntary repayments. So you can, if you want, keep on top of it.
You can pay it down, and then they take less of it when the qualifying...
Correct. It'll just be whatever you pay off. Or
you could opt for 0 repayments, and then when the property is sold, then it just gets paid off.
Exactly. And a lot of especially the lenders we work with, have something called the negative equity kind of pledge, which basically means if the property gets downvalued or they've borrowed more than the property value, it won't fall on the the family to kind of repay the difference, which is a kind of a key element.
Right, sure.
But for more information, the Equity Release Council is a very good website for all these things.
Amazing. Okay, I just like to clarify stuff. That's a lot of what I'm doing on the podcast is to
absolutely.
Okay.
You can tell I'm heavily regulated with all.
With everything you're not saying. You're saying less than you are saying. Your connection with Lubavitch. When did that happen?
So, I obviously went through that kind of journey of becoming more religious, and I suppose obviously there were a lot of Chabad or Lubavitch families around who I had access to, and there's in particular one family in Hale. I'll give him a shout out, Zalman Klein.
Sure.
Very, very.
He's not in Hale anymore.
He's not in Hale. No. Maybe in other places. But he's him and his wife Risa were tremendous people in the community, and actually just being around them, I learned a lot about the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who was again someone who was a real inspiration to me, and that's for a few reasons. Number one, he took a post-Holocaust generation, which was probably the lowest, the lowest level of esteem, and really down in the pits, as they say, and really uplifted a whole generation. But number two, if you want to look at the best franchise out there, there's two things constant in life. Anywhere you go is Coca-Cola. There is Chabad, Lubavitch, everywhere. And, just to see, there was just the other day, the Kinnes HaShluchim, which is the kind of the conference. There was, I believe, 6,500 rabbis all around the world, all with that common goal of uplifting and spreading love. And that's really, a big part of what I hope to do is in my finance rabbi world, obviously finance people, but also bring inspiration, a little bit of a smile into everything we do.
Incredible. As we mentioned earlier, you wear many hats and carry the weight of a lot of responsibilities. I'm curious to know what your process looks like from when an idea comes into your head until you get it off the ground. Because many people are walking around with great ideas, whether it's a business idea, a product idea, but very few have the ability to actually execute it.
Yeah.
You seem to constantly be coming up with new channels and processes to actually implement however wild these ideas might seem when they come into your head, but they within a few months or so, they're happening, they're active, and people are benefiting from them.
Yeah.
I'd love to learn from you, sort of, what's your process, how you go about this?
So I think for me, and again, this is probably the wrong way to do it, is I tend to run with an idea and then think about it afterwards, fill in the gaps. but I think it's like everything, everything that I do is very kind of connected, and I have always had that, the different brands, UK lender, UK advisor, UK accountant, UK investor.
The first thing you do is you buy the domain, isn't it?
Buy the domain, exactly. And those were all bought like 10 years ago. I just won't tell you the other domains I have. But those are ideas that a bigger plan that I've always had was to essentially bring those different brands together. Right. And I suppose it's now just filling in the gaps. And I think that sometimes brings a certain sort of stability. If you have, from an investor's perspective, they call it the equity story. Right. But if you have that longer term plan of, what's the end goal, what do you want, and then you can start filling it in. Obviously, you've got to have the right people around you. That's a big shout out to the team because they tend to fill in the gaps.
Pick up the
pieces, exactly. But no, I think that's the key element is having that drive to know what are you trying to achieve at the end of this. I think if you don't have that end point, then it's very hard. Right. So let's say I suddenly wanted to go into a cafe and start making waffles. I think that would be a drastic change in my plan. Right. So I think everyone would kind of look at me and think he has actually lost it, which probably is very, very true. But the fact is, if we're ultimately just that end goal of driving capital, getting people together, and actually it all kind of fits in, then they're not too, different.
In terms of sort of process, is it right? I need to hire somebody for this role. I need to build that map out of a workflow, how this is going to look. I want to zoom into that and understand what does it look like from idea to execution.
So ultimately, the first thing I do personally, I one of my hats years ago was being a graphic designer. That's kind of probably where we have,
we cross paths.
We cross paths at that point. We were a competition.
I wish.
But I have to say, being that type of person where I can visualize things, the first thing I always do is I make a deck.
Really?
That's the first thing I do, and that for me is quite an important process. So I think maybe other people do like a board and we'll start putting things on. For me, it's about making, in essence, like an investment deck. Mapping out the story of what's the brands. Make the logo. What's the brand? What's the the story? What's the challenge? What am I trying to achieve? What am I trying to fix?
Laying this visual foundation.
And for me, that's quite important because I then have to translate that over to other people. Right. So if I, don't visualize it myself and I'm not able to tell it over, everyone will kind of think, well, what, bottom line, Maxim, what are you trying to say? So at least I can say, well, your bottom line, here you go. Here's a 30-page, loads of questions.
Figure it out.
Figure it out. And a key part of actually, to say for a lot of people, I have a big part in every deck that I do for every business. And again, I'm pitching to myself really at this point. I'm not actively looking for investors. That's what I want to hear is just
how you're showing back to yourself what your idea is and what my next step should be. That's
correct. And that's the pitch deck. I'd say, maybe another conversation. I think equity investment is got its issues, and I've been at many times where I've pitched and I've been pitched to, and every ask people what should be in a pitch deck, and everyone will give you different. I think I at one time did about 30 pitch decks for 30 different investors, and it's like why go through that? Yeah. But actually, what it taught me was it's a great way to put your ideas down to actually crystallize what you're trying to achieve, because ultimately you've got 20 pages. I always do a page on it as well, 5 questions. I got this actually from another business when I was back in the day of pitching. They had 5 questions about my business, and I thought it was a tremendous thing. And I always put that in everything I do now, because I have to in 5 questions, which is a hard thing for me because I can probably give you a 3-hour conversation of what it is, but to really specifically say what are you trying to achieve here, and I think that for me is a really, really important element. Pitch decks for myself is a key element.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. And then obviously with so much time on your hands because you weren't doing very much, you thought Smicha would be the next obvious step in this journey. Where, how, why? Talk to me.
So I'm probably, like most people, normal people, I'm coming across as very not normal here. I'm really not.
Really. Do a lot of edits.
Like most people, they want to be, when they're 6-7 years old, they want to be Superman or, a EMT, some sort of, some cool thing with lots of flashy lights on top of the car. I wanted to be a rabbi. And again, I can't answer why. I can't answer why I wanted to be that. But ultimately that was why kind of, they say in Hebrew, it's that what was my tafkid, but that was really what I, as a child. And then I don't think I ever grew out of that kind of want to be a rabbi. I went in a different direction professionally. I kind of went into, someone once said to me, actually, being a rabbi isn't a job for a Jewish boy. So I think it was, get your profession first, right, and then do it. And then obviously over COVID, definitely did have a lot more time on the hands. We had to put a few fires out, and then once the fires were out, it was like, okay, a few lockdowns. What do we do? Yeah. So I decided, that was a great opportunity for me to actually go after a passion I had. So I joined an amazing program. So to do smicha in Heta, and the kind of one of the main rabbanim who gave the smicha was a guy called Rav Gavriel Zinner. So the Natia Gavriel, right, written 32 Sefarim books on halacha. Again, just tremendous people to kind of meet in life. And I kind of studied hard. It wasn't easy, especially with a young family, trying to deal with business. But it did give me a kind of a common purpose and a goal. I think quite good as goals for me is a good thing. I think if I didn't have goals, I would procrastinate on a major scale. So I think having goals for me is a key thing, which is probably why I do all these mad things like right now. Let's do this and that, right, because it's a goal. I've got something to work to. So I got smicha, thank God, and
how long did that take? What was
it was a couple of years, to get through, and it was a lot of hard work and making sure you understood. I don't know if anyone's you yourself studied for quite a while, and it's definitely not easy, but it was it really invigorated me and gave me kind of a
underlying
purpose, exactly. And so then I was thinking, okay, so I've become a in inverted commas rabbi. Do I go and find a community in the middle of nowhere and become a rabbi, or do I actually carry on as I am, which I was enjoying, and incorporate my rabbi-ness into the world. So one thing I always found was that there was a lot of Jewish lenders. It just happens to be a Jewish thing to lend money. You can read an article of mine in a magazine which shows the history of Jewish lending. It was in a magazine. Yeah, I'll send it you for the show notes.
Put a link in the show notes. I'd love to read that.
And it is a great article on the history, actually going way back to Aaron of Lincoln, who was, ultimately Jewish people. There was a restriction through the Pope of Catholics lending each other, basically based on the Old Testament, lending each other with interest. So it became the Jewish profession that the Jews lent the money. So that's how it kind of, and ever since it's been a booming business. And but a lot of Jewish lenders, and the issue that a lot of Jewish borrowers have with Jewish lenders is they can't lend or borrow from each other correctly because they need to have, they can't charge interest. So the rabbis brought a wonderful mechanism in place called a heta iska, which basically changes the loan into an investment, essentially, joint investments, a partnership.
Right.
So I've worked together with some tremendous people, who very, very clever people who have basically structured a heta iska that looks just like a UK legal document, and started to educate Jewish lenders into doing heta iskas, because a lot of the Jewish lenders, and I kind of agree with them, I'll be honest, is they were pretty scared to go to these big rabbis who they didn't really understand. Right. They had very strong accents, and they didn't really understand. So I'm a boy from maybe more of a polished English atmosphere, and how can I utilize my in inverted commas rabbi status to number one, connect to these individuals who want to do heta iska, and obviously then change my accent to the rabbis in the in each side of the room, and basically do again. It's people who want to do something, people want to get something, and that's really my profession. Is I'm the matchmaker. That's bringing people together to make it pretty simple.
So these are high street lending institutions that were owned by Jews, they're managed by Jews. Like, what's that?
So we're working with high street. There's some pretty big banks out there who have got Jewish ownerships or use certain type of funding facilities that are Jewish owned, so have real issues of needing to require heteriska. But also with specialist lenders, we're just about to sign a big lender in the UK, which will be announced in the next couple of days. Spoiler alert. Yeah. Who is going to sign a heteriska. So we're actively working with some fantastic lenders, and I didn't realize, I put out the idea and I kind of opened the Jewish Lending Institute, which is where I kind of do this work from back in May 23. And I've never been so busy on this side of the business, as in it's not my day-to-day job. Right. It's just dealing with. Sure.
What's that process looking like? How are you identifying the banks that have the Jewish people behind it, and how are you reaching out? Are they perceptive to the idea? Or you mentioned they're nervous to sort of come on board. Like, what's correct? How are they taking to it?
I think it's two. I think I'm potentially. I'm in a very good position in the fact that I, pass a lot of these guys, because obviously I have non-Jewish clients as well. Right. So I've got clients I can pass on to them, but I've got lots of clients. And again, this is a reach out to them. I can be passing you more clients. I've got clients who they could use, so I know them. I know them personally. And I think we've made that relationship where hopefully they trust me. There's a two-way process there. But slowly, I'm not there to rush it. I think it's really, really important. We're just about to be launching our Jewish Lending Institute website as well, which will have lots of informative information, again, in normal, down-to-earth, in non-complicated ways that lenders can see how they can get involved in doing the heteriska, but also borrowers can see which lenders have taken up on heteriska. What's the process? Just make it more easily accessible. It's definitely something that I was getting frustrated with, and it's like everything. Why do something is because you see that things aren't being done, and from past experience and growing up, I kind of that thing of, if it's not being done, I'll just do it. Let's get on with it.
Talk to me about Israel. You spend quite a bit of time there. I see, trying to catch you. You're in Israel this week. You're in England next week. You're somewhere else. You're so very much in the two places. Yeah. What's going on with that? So, I have to say, I've always had a beautiful love of Israel. It's obviously something that comes from my family, and it's a wonderful place. And obviously, as you know, we all kind of, if we go on holiday, it's to Israel. That's the place to go. Beautiful country and wonderful people. Obviously, this drive for capital started conversations in Israel, and suddenly grew those conversations. So what I kind of find myself doing now, which is quite amazing, is I'm kind of going out to Israel and kind of really holding the rod for the UK. This is a country I grew up with. I've got a lot of love for the country, and I think it's a great place. I know it very well. Worked in it for a very long time. So I'm going to Israel, speaking with investors, and actually lending arms. So I've got lenders who are now looking to facilitate lending lines to English banks as well. And it's just we know Israel is called the startup nation. Yeah. There's that entrepreneurial spirit. Even going into a shop there, you can just tell the shopkeeper behind he's already he's probably got an app that he's been building in the background. You know that guy. It's and it's just that real power for the lust for making life better. It's a country that was born out of the depths of the Holocaust. People really picked themselves up, and ultimately just built an incredible country. Now I can do it for work. So it's you got an excuse. Got an excuse to travel. Nothing like a good excuse to travel. That's amazing. Sort of interfacing between the Israelis and the funds that are there, and correct, bringing them opportunities from your knowledge in the UK, and sort of opening up doors again, like you're saying.
Correct, and it's very I'm not doing anything different. Whether it's I call them my front facing clients, which is the guy down the street or a guy down the road who needs finance, or if it's the back end of a lender who needs a funding line, and ultimately the conversations may be very different. You may be dealing with 100 million on one side and 100,000 on the other, but ultimately it's still that thing of connecting different things together, and making things happen.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Financing your next property should never be a headache. Alex Haffner at Fusion Funding set out to change the way investors fund their purchases. With a personal and boutique approach, Alex is driven to finding financial solutions that work for you and your particular requirements. From small independent units to large residential blocks and everything in between, Alex has built a reputation as a trusted funding provider that understands, delivers, and helps his clients win every step of the way. Reach out to Alex today. Details in the show notes.
Approximately 9 months ago, you posted on LinkedIn a chilling picture of the desk of Professor Herman Zondek.
Oh, yeah.
Share that anecdote with the audience. And as someone who's sort of been watching what's going on, obviously, across the UK, the protests, the mobs from afar.
Sure.
I'm curious to know how it looks to you from your vantage point, and what made you share that.
So there's a place in Jerusalem called Yad Vashem, which ultimately is the Holocaust Museum. Now, I've been there many years. When I visited Israel, I used to go. And it's a chilling place, but somewhere where it's important to go and remind ourselves of, unfortunately, how dark the world can get. And again, I'm always one to look at light as well. So on the other hand, how light the world can get as well. I think it's just important to say there is a big part of Yad Vashem which has the light upon the nations element, which is kind of the non-Jewish guys and girls and just incredible people who saved Jewish people during the Holocaust, who hid them in basements, and that's definitely the light in the world. But that particular physician, he was the physician to the Kaisers. He was pretty high up in Germany. And he, you could look at his life and think, he had the best life. He was the top physician. He was, the top of his profession. And he writes they actually mocked up his study in Yad Vashem, and they have his last entry in the diary that basically says, "We were living in a fool's paradise." And to me, that is quite a chilling phrase, but actually very, very important in the way that we look at life. Is we obviously we're always engaging with people, we're always there, but unfortunately, as we know, and we'll talk about October the 7th maybe very soon, but the world can get pretty dark, and it's just knowing that sometimes we need to watch our backs. I mean, I know as a parent, I'm always making sure that my kids are safe and are happy, and that's the mechanism. So I think there's also that element of we can sometimes live in a fool's paradise. We need to understand the dangers around us, and it's unfortunately I have quite a chilling one. It's not always something I tend to like to post, but it's always something that I think it's important to put out there.
Yeah, you mentioned October 7th. You were in Israel at the time, weren't you?
I was there.
Can you share with us your experience?
Wow. I mean, obviously it was the festival of Simchat Torah in Israel. We woke up very early, 6:00, I think it was, on October the 7th. And my wife thought there was someone outside kicking a football. So she go, can you go outside and check what it is? So I went and checked, and suddenly saw in the distance, I heard sirens and rockets, and very, very soon saw a rocket fly over us, being intercepted by the very, very good Iron Dome interception system, the rocket interception system. But it was a day that I will never forget. I think we actually, because it was a festival, we actually went to synagogue, to shul. We walked there thinking, this will be over in an hour or so. Obviously, we know what unfortunately was happening more down south to where we were. But I just remember walking down the streets and seeing young men being throwing their uniform on, getting into the cars and driving off. And they didn't know what they were getting themselves into. I mean, you've got to think now, we know, they were basically going to a place which, thousands of terrorists kind of had broken in and were butchering, innocent individuals. And these young kids, young families, they were, the wives were kissing them. It was kind of like, you could think from a movie of like a Second World War movie, or, and that's the image that sticks in my head. That,
this is 6:30 in the morning. You're just walking to shore.
Just walking, yes. That must have been about 7 or 8. But yeah, very, very early on. And the courage of these guys, they were there. I mean, Israel is very unique in the fact that their army is the people's army. Every other country has professional armies. Israel has the people's army. These are, normal individuals who obviously, serve their country, but they're normal human beings. They're not career army, right. And they were going to protect their country. Unfortunately, we knew of people who unfortunately never came back, and their sacrifice has been for the light. But it's tough. And you go. I've travelled back from the UK and Israel, and going back into Israel now. It's hard to see. There are individuals who are on their miluim, they're doing their, reservist duty. They're serving the country, but it's hard. And obviously, we're always thinking of the hostages and praying for them. And please God. But one thing I can say about Israel is, and this is the nation that was born out of the depths, as I said, of the Holocaust. We will survive, we will build, and ultimately, we just want a better future for Israelis and Palestinians. We should not be having this. We need to grow out of this war, and that's what we pray for.
Oh, that's really beautiful. Just sort of coming towards the wrapping up, then it's been an amazing opportunity to chat with you. I feel so privileged. You're here, and you've carved out time.
I feel honoured. I feel honoured.
I don't take it for granted. Not a short while seems to pass sort of without a new update coming from you guys. What's next on the horizon for the UK Advisor or for the group of companies?
Well, I kind of gave an example. I'm actually opening up a cafe and we're doing waffles.
the UK waffle.
The UK waffle, exactly. Or that's me talking, the waffle. Sorry, dad joke there. I think it's like everything. We're keeping our eyes and ears open. There's always opportunities, and I'm forever speaking to people about opportunities. I think there is the thing of don't do too much. Perfect what you have. I think for me, the Jewish Lending Institute has been a real, incredible, 12 months, 12, 18 months, getting involved in, the Heter Iskas and really, working with lenders. So, I'd love to say the announcements coming out of the Jewish Lending Institute with new lenders coming on board. That's going to be that's my pet project.
Right, beautiful.
And I'd say probably professionally, as much as I've facilitated loans and have helped people, my proudest moments are when these lenders will do, Heter Iskas, and obviously that then hopefully for them will facilitate more deals and get things moving.
Bringing all that together, the smicha, the bridging of money between lenders and just building yourself that system of helping people. In a much
and I think that's the key is if you can help each other, just be honest and just genuine individuals. I mean, there are plenty of people out there who will say you've got to be in business, you've got to be shrewd and you've got to do all these wonderful things. I will always remember something my rabbis taught me. The first question you are asked when you go into the next world is, how were you in business? And that is a key thing. Business really shows you, because unfortunately in business, you can have the best, but you also see the real people. But if you can be the same person in business as you are personally, I mean, maybe in the short term you may not be as successful, but I'm telling you now, in the long term, the people who will trust you because you've been above and beyond in business, I'd say that is the most amazing piece of advice I can probably give.
That's really beautiful. Thank you so much, Maxim. Honestly, really appreciate you taking the time, and it's been incredible catching up with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.
There you have it, friends. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes. We have some great conversations lined up, and if you have enjoyed this or any previous episodes, feel free to share them with family or friends. Thank you once again to Dovi Feldman, Alex Haffner, and this week's guest, Maxim Cohen at the Jewish Lending Institute, for your support. Until next time.